welcome back to our read aloud of the Land of Stories. And if you remember, last time when we left off, we were in Fairy Kingdom. Do you remember that, where the fairy was up for a trial to be kicked out of Fairy Kingdom forever, and Connor stepped up and saved her? So last time we checked, we were leaving Fairy Kingdom, and they actually encountered something from one of Dad's stories. Do you remember what that was? They were both shocked because they thought it was a story that Dad had made up. Yeah, it was the walking fish. Do you remember that? Okay, so chapter 13 is called The Wolf Pack. There was blood everywhere. Uh-oh. What's our setting feel like? What's the mood of our setting right now when it starts off with a sentence that says, there was blood everywhere? Pretty gory, maybe scary, ominous. Do you think it has a positive connotation or a negative connotation? Yeah, I would say negative. That doesn't sound good, does it? There was blood everywhere. White feathers and bits of wood covered the ground. A driver had been transporting a cart full of geese into the northern kingdom when the big, bad wolf pack attacked. Have we encountered the big, bad wolf pack before? Yes. Do you remember when someone was on horseback and helped save them? Yeah, Goldilocks. Do you remember that? That was back in the beginning, like when they had first got to the Land of Stories. I didn't even know if they knew about the wishing. Yeah, I think they had just set off on the wishing spell. And Froggy had warned them about the wolves. I think that's when it happened. The only thing that remained in one piece was the green floppy hat the driver had been wearing. So what does that kind of leave you to make the inference? What inference are you led to make there? The only thing that remained intact was the driver's floppy hat. Do you think that the driver survived? It doesn't sound like it, does it? Ooh. The wolves were spread out under the trees, chewing on the bones of their victims. Malumclaw jerked his head up and stared into the trees. Someone was coming. He could smell them. Whoever this person was, their scent made him anxious. Is being anxious a good feeling? No, being anxious is kind of... Can you think of a synonym for being anxious? Yeah, it's kind of like an extreme nervousness, isn't it? Good. We've got company, Malumclaw growled. All the wolves jumped to their feet, ready to attack again if they had to. But they were no match for who was approaching. A dark hooded figure slowly moved through the trees and up to the wolves. It stood fearlessly in front of them for a moment before unveiling itself. Who do you think this is? A hooded figure that's showing zero fear, walking through the woods and approaching Malumclaw. Who do you think could evoke anxiety or anxiousness in Malumclaw? Who do you think would be that powerful? We've met this character before. Hello, Malumclaw, said the evil queen. Who are you? Malumclaw barked at the woman. The woman before him, less than half his size, was making the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Have you ever felt like that? Where you weren't cold, but the hair on the back of your neck stood up? What feeling typically makes you feel like that? Yeah. Fear and terror. You're scared, right? Uh-huh. You don't know me, but you know of me, the evil queen said. Everyone does. It's the evil queen, a wolf snarled. Malumclaw began shifting his weight on his front paws. He was intimidated, and he didn't like it. Do you think Malumclaw is used to being intimidated by someone? No, he's typically the aggressor, isn't he? He's typically the predator, if we're using our science words, yeah. You have a lot of nerve approaching my pack, Malumclaw said. I should have one of my wolves rip your throat out. I dare you, said the evil queen. There wasn't an ounce of fear in her body. She walked closer to them, and the wolves cowered back, Malmclaw included. "What do you want from us?" he demanded. "I've come to make a deal," the evil queen said. "We don't make deals," Malmclaw growled. "You will once you see what I have to offer," the evil queen said. This intrigued the wolf. "What kind of deal?" he said. "A trade," the evil queen said. "There are 2 children traveling through the kingdom. 1 boy, 1 girl. Twins." Who is she talking about, guys? Yeah, Connor and Alex. That doesn't sound good, does it? Sorry, my phone went a little dark. Hopefully you guys can still see me. It's sunny out, which is nice. "I want you to find them and bring them to me, unscathed." What do you think unscathed mean? You know but yeah, un is not. So unscathed. Yeah, like not harmed. Like not scratched. Not hurt. "You want children?" Malmclaw mocked. "They have something, several things actually, that I need." What do you think she's talking about? Yeah, the items from the wishing spell, right? The evil queen said, "I would do it myself, but I'm indisposed at the moment." "And if we bring them to you, what will you give us in return?" he asked. "When you bring them to me, I shall give you the one thing you want more than anything in the world," the evil queen said. What do you think that the wolves would want more than anything in the world? Malmclaw laughed. "Wolves want for nothing," he said. The evil queen stared at him as if she were looking into his soul. "Is that so?" she asked. "Then why do you and your pack crusade around the lands, terrorizing everything in your path? What are you trying to prove? Whose revenge are you seeking?" Malmclaw was silent. He couldn't deny it. "I will give you the one thing that will avenge your father's death wholly," the evil queen said. Who was Malmclaw's father? Yeah, the big bad wolf, right? "I will give you Queen Red Riding Hood in exchange for the twins." All the wolves, including Malmclaw, growled their doubts, but this indeed was intriguing to him. "And how could you possibly do that?" The evil queen looked at him so sternly that his heart began to race. "Do not question me. I will have the young queen in my possession by the end of the week. Bring me the children, and I will hand her over to you. Do we have a deal or not?" Malmclaw looked frightened. Malmclaw looked at the frightened members of his pack. They nodded at him. They didn't want to upset the queen. "Deal," Malmclaw said. "But let me warn you, if you fail to keep your end of the bargain, we will snap your neck like a twig." Well, that's a pretty gruesome example, but that's an example of a type of figurative language. They're comparing her neck to a twig, using like grass. What type of figurative language is that? Yeah, it's a gruesome simile, isn't it? The evil queen walked up to the wolf and stood inches from his face, looking him forcefully in the eyes. "Let me warn you," she said. "Fail to keep your part, and I'll have you turned into rugs, just as Red Riding Hood did to your father." Do you remember when we were in the palace with Red Riding Hood and the twins saw the wolf rug? "And if you ever threaten me like that again, I will skin you myself," the evil queen said. Malmclaw froze. The evil queen knew she had him exactly where she wanted him. "See you soon," she said. She put her hood back over her head and disappeared into the trees in the direction she'd come from. All the wolves stood still for a moment, afraid to move. "What are we waiting for?" Malumclaw shouted, his pride bruised. "We have to find the twins." They charged into the horizon, howling in unison. The sound was deafening. Uh-oh. So now Alex and Connor also have the big bad wolf pack after them. That's not good, is it? That was a quick chapter. How about I'll start the next one? The next chapter is 14, The Sleeping Kingdom. I'm going to see how long it is. I think we can do this chapter too. Let's do chapter 14, The Sleeping Kingdom. Trix insisted Alex and Connor stay with her the night after her trial. Do you remember who Trix is? Yeah, she's the fairy, isn't she? Of course, that meant the twins slept on the ground underneath her bird-sized house, hanging from a tree branch. But it was a kind gesture nonetheless. Alex and Connor couldn't sleep after seeing the walking fish in person. They laid under the stars in the fairy kingdom, most of which were actually just fairies sleeping in midair, and let their thoughts wander. Wait for that squeaky truck to drive by. I always thought that the walking fish was one of Dad's stories that he made up himself, Alex said. I wonder how he heard it. Probably the same way he heard all the other stories that came from this place, Connor said. But then why wasn't it as well known as Cinderella or Snow White stories? Why wasn't it written in the Land of Stories? Alex said, and then asked a question that had been on her mind for a while. Do you think Dad or Grandma were ever here? Do you think they ever traveled into the Land of Stories and just never told us? Connor had to think about it. What do you guys think? Do you think that their dad and Grandma, who both have owned the book, do you think they ever traveled into the Land of Stories and just never happened to mention it? That's a big secret to keep, isn't it? But is it possible? I mean, in this book, just about anything's possible, isn't it? The idea had crossed his mind once or twice before, considering that the Land of Stories had been in their grandma and dad's possessions before their grandma had passed it on. Could they just as easily have been transported into the world as Alex and Connor had? And if they had, how had their dad and grandma managed to find a way home? I don't think so, Connor ultimately decided. They love fairy tales so much. If they ever got here and saw everything we've seen, I doubt they would have left. The next morning, Trix generously thanked them again and again, and after they shared goodbyes, the twins started their journey into the next kingdom. Sleeping Kingdom, here we come, Alex said. Why do I have the feeling that spindle's going to be the most difficult item to get? Connor said. Alex opened the journal to see her brother's prediction was true. Here's from the journal. Remember, I can tell because the font changed. The spindle that pricked Sleeping Beauty's finger was the easiest item for me to collect. I had no prior plan of acquiring it and simply pleaded my case to the queen, and she was very sympathetic. She let me take the spindle on the condition that I would return it to her once I was finished using it. Queen Sleeping Beauty was very wise, especially for someone who had been asleep for a century, and I believe she knew more about what I was after than she was willing to admit. Well, that's lucky, Connor said. I wonder what sleeping for 100 years does to you. Every morning when I wake up for school, after about the 4th or 5th time I hit the snooze button, I always think that I could sleep for 100 years. I wonder if you'd wake up super refreshed, or you'd still be drowsy afterwards. What do you guys think if you slept for 100 years? I know when I oversleep, I'm drowsy. How about you? Some of you are energized? I'm a drowsy one. That's an interesting thought, Alex said. I wonder if she dreamed about anything. I assumed it would have been a very long dream. The twins had no money left, but claiming to have been separated from their parents, they managed to convince 2 drivers transporting a cart of goats to let them ride along into the Sleeping Kingdom. The twins didn't mind sitting in the back with the goats, but the goats weren't as thrilled about sharing with the twins. What are you looking at? Connor said to one of them, after it stared at him for a good half an hour. The road ran alongside a great sparkling ocean with water that was as blue as the sky. It was like an ocean front from their world, except 1,000 times more vibrant. Look how beautiful the ocean is here, Alex said. And look over there. It's Mermaid Bay. What fairy book characters do you think would live in Mermaid Bay? She was referring to a large bay just ahead that curved into the shoreline. That's pretty neat to know that right there, as we sit in this cart, there are actual mermaids swimming down there, Alex said. Yeah, Connor said. Too bad we didn't bring any snorkeling gear. Alex was flipping through the journal and making a list in her head. We have 5 items to collect, she said. All we need are the spindle, jewels from Snow White's coffin, and a saber from the deepest sea. Whatever that might be, Connor said. Didn't we talk about what that might be? The saber from the deepest sea? I know of a fairy tale that takes place in the sea, don't you? Doesn't her dad have a saber? Or a trident or something? Something like that. Could be wrong, but that's what sticks in my head. Especially if we're sitting here talking about mermaids, right? Alex stared longingly at the water. What could the saber from the deepest sea be? With all her fairy tale knowledge, she still couldn't figure it out. And it was starting to get to her. She was hoping that any minute it would just appear in the middle of the ocean. We'll figure it out, Connor said. Or I should say, you'll figure it out. And I'll pretend to help. After they had been on the road for a bit, the twins couldn't help but eavesdrop on the conversation the drivers were having. Did you hear about the news from the Charming Kingdom? One of the drivers asked the other. No, he said. Both of Queen Cinderella's glass slippers have been stolen, the driver said. Stolen? By whom? I don't know, but I reckon there's a reward for anyone with information, he said. The twins didn't know how to react to this news. If the kingdom was claiming the slippers had been stolen, had Cinderella or Sir Lambton not put the slipper in their bag? Was there a warrant for their arrest? And then, the most troubling question of all. If they had one of the slippers, who had the other one? Both were stolen? Alex whispered to her brother. It had to be the woman we saw in Red Riding Hood's castle, Connor said. She must be collecting for the wishing spell, too. I knew it. Let's just hope we get to the spindle before she does, Alex said. The road turned away from the ocean, and the cart headed north into the sleeping kingdom. It was a very hilly place surrounded by towering mountain ranges. It was a surprisingly dismal land, although the twins weren't sure what they had expected. All the fields were dry, and all the trees were bare. Everything seemed like it had been alive for a very long time. Why is everything dead? Connor asked. I don't think they're dead, Alex said. I think they're sleeping. Sleeping Beauty's castle was located in the center of a village called Sleepy Valley, and once the twins arrived there and hopped off the cart, they understood how it had gotten its name. The entire village surrounding the castle looked deserted. The twins found a man standing behind the open window of a bakery. He was resting his head on his hands and his elbows on the windowsill. I'm going to wait for that truck to drive away. Maybe. Yeah. Looked like a plumber was there working. Hope everything's okay at the house. Not mine, the neighbors. He was resting his head on his hands with his elbow on the windowsill. He looked like he was sleeping standing up. Excuse me, Alex said, not wanting to be rude and wake him up. Yes, the man asked with his eyes still closed. Where is everyone? Alex asked. Resting, the man said with a yawn and began to snore. Sure enough, as the twins walked through the village, they could see many shopkeepers and servants drowsily moving about inside the shops, slowly getting their work done. They all looked as if they were about to fall asleep any second. I thought the curse on the kingdom had been broken, Connor said. They don't seem to be sleeping because they have to. It looks like they're sleeping because they want to, Alex said. Alex and Connor walked through the sluggish town and found Sleeping Beauty's castle. The castle was a spectacular sight. It was the tallest structure the twins had ever seen. It was made from peach-colored stones, and its many tall towers soared into the sky with the tallest in every center. When the twins looked closely, they saw the residue left from the vines that had once grown up the castle walls. There were many vast gardens surrounding the castle, or at least there would have been if anything were still alive. Every few minutes they would wake up. Gardeners slept in the gardens, still clasping their tools. Every few minutes they would wake up and continue working, but they would fall back asleep almost immediately. There were guards everywhere, but the twins effortlessly walked past them. Every once in a while, the guard would open an eye and consider saying something to them, but then he decided to go back to sleep instead. They found the entrance to the castle and entered. They walked down a long hall with a soaring ceiling that led to the throne room. It had white pillars and a checkered floor. The ceiling was painted the colors of dusk, with vivid pinks and oranges. Ooh, like a sunset, right? That's pretty. There was a really pretty one last night if you guys saw it. Guards lined the entire room, and they were all entirely unconscious. Remember, un means not, so they're not conscious. So what's a synonym for conscious? They're not what? Yeah, they're not awake. Sitting on the throne ahead of them was a beautiful woman. She was speaking with two men. One was tall and handsome. The other was short and old with a white beard. Who do you think this woman is? Make an inference. Who is the beautiful woman? The woman wore a tiara made of silver flowers and had long, flowing golden hair. She wore a thin gown, a shade of pale rose, with matching gloves. The twins knew without a doubt that it was... What's your inference? Yeah, Sleeping Beauty. She was speaking with a royal advisor and her husband, King Chase. She looked troubled. Oh, my leg's asleep from sitting here, guys. She looked troubled and in a state of deep contemplation. She was tired, too, like the twins' mother looked when there was a lot on her mind. Perhaps we should enforce a law. No sleeping permitted during the day, the advisor said. Absolutely not, Sleeping Beauty said. I will not force something so oppressive on my people. Let us not forget that it isn't their fault. Their curse is over, Your Highness, the advisor said. It is time for the kingdom to wake up and see that. As far as I'm concerned, the curse is still upon us until the day the kingdom is in the exact condition it was before the spell was cast, Sleeping Beauty said. I may be awake, but being asleep for 100 years has taken a toll on them. They shouldn't be punished or held accountable for this. Darling, you may have no choice, King Cheese said, taking her hand in his. The kingdom is falling apart. There are no crops being grown or business being done. Let me think about this, she said, and let out a long sigh. May I make a suggestion? Connor said, walking toward the trio. He took them by surprise. They didn't know anyone else was in the room that was conscious. Alex was a little scared. She had no idea what her brother was about to say. She hoped his speech in the fairy kingdom hadn't given him a big head. Who are you? The advisor asked. I'm Connor. This is my sister Alex, he said. Alex awkwardly waved behind him. You have a lovely castle, she said. How'd you get in here? King Chase asked. Seriously? Connor asked him, gesturing to the sleeping guards behind him. This isn't exactly Fort Knox. Do you guys know what Fort Knox is? Fort Knox is in the United States. It's a military fort. They don't know what that is, Connor, Alex whispered. Young man, the advisor said, with all due respect, this is a very important meeting we're discussing, and we've been trying to find a solution for years and still haven't come up with anything that doesn't take away basic human freedoms, Sleeping Beauty said. So, if this young man thinks he may have an answer, I say we let him speak, Sleeping Beauty said. The men didn't argue with her. Connor had the floor. Have you ever heard of coffee before? Connor asked. They stared blankly at him. Never mind. I've been told it's stunts your growth anyway, he said. I fall asleep in school a lot. It's not my fault. My brain just turns off when I get bored. A trick I discovered when I remember to use it is to wear a rubber band around my wrist and snap it right when I feel myself drifting off to sleep. The sting keeps me conscious for a good 5 minutes guaranteed. They were puzzled by his proposal. Look, it isn't a rocket science solution, but it works, Connor said. And your people could do it themselves. So you wouldn't be forcing them into anything. And maybe if they did it enough, they would eventually would not need it anymore. They still needed convincing. Connor turned to Alex for help. Alex, do you have any rubber bands with you? Connor asked. I may have some hair ties in my bag, Alex said. She put her bag on the floor and searched through it, accidentally knocking out the glass slipper onto the floor. The clank echoed through the throne room. The twins panicked. It was as if time had frozen. Sleeping Beauty, her husband, and the advisor grew very tense. How did you get that? Sleeping Beauty asked. It's Queen Cinderella's glass slipper, the advisor said. No, it isn't what you think, Alex said, quickly putting it back in her bag. We didn't steal it, Connor said. Guards, King Chase shouted. A few guards behind the twins suddenly awoke and became alert. Seize them, the king shouted. Here we go again, Connor said, as the guard sprinted towards them. He grabbed Alex's wrist and pulled her into a run. Your Majesty, Alex pleaded with Sleeping Beauty, we've come to borrow your spindle. We're just collecting items for the wishing spell. Sleeping Beauty stood about to speak, but the twins couldn't wait around to hear what she had to say. They were running around the throne room in circles, missing the extended hands of the guards trying to grab hold of them. Alex and Connor ran through a set of doors leading out of the throne room. They had no idea where they were going, but they knew they had to move. They had been through too much to let the guards catch them this time. I'm so tired of being chased, Connor yelled. They ran down the hallway after hallway, making sharp turns wherever they could throw off the guards. They were moving so fast that the beautiful architecture and artwork of the castle was nothing but a blur. Suddenly, the hallway they came into was a dead end. Now what are we going to do? Alex asked. Quick, in here, Connor said. And he pulled her through the closest set of open doors. They found a stone staircase on the other side and ran up it. It spiraled higher and higher, and the twins wondered if it would ever end. They were climbing to an impossible height. They must have been headed to the tallest tower in the castle. They reached the very top of the stairs and found a big black door. They rushed through it and immediately locked it from the other side. Now where are we? Connor asked and looked around the room. The twins were standing in a large circular room with tall windows. There were violet drapes and a lavender rug. A balcony wrapped around the entire outside. Only 2 pieces of furniture were in here. An enormous bed and a spinning wheel made from dark wood. Connor, Alex said softly, I think we're in Sleeping Beauty's room. The room she slept in for 100 years. Connor walked over to the bed. There was a beautiful engraving on the headboard that said, For 100 years she slept. The hearts of her people she kept. So they all waited with patience for the bliss of true love and true love's first kiss. Ooh. What's that called if it was poetry? It has it's like a paragraph, but in poems we don't call it a paragraph, we call it a stanza. Good. There are 4 lines in this poem. Do you guys remember the rhyme scheme? Slept, kept, bliss, kiss. What's the rhyme scheme of that stanza? Good. A, A, B, B. Good job. Good poetry knowledge there, guys. Good recall. Alex went to the spinning wheel, but the spindle was gone. The spindle isn't here, Alex said. I don't understand. The man who wrote the journal promised Sleeping Beauty that he would return it after he used it. It's not here? Or did he just not return it because the spell didn't work? Connor asked. The lock on the black door began to rattle as someone from the other side unlocked it. Hide, Alex whispered. She and her brother dove underneath the bed. The black door swung open. The twins expected to see the clunky boots of the guard, but instead, they saw a pair of pink heels. Just doing my read aloud, don't mind me. If I'm doing weird, if
you were on a thing, a meeting,
I'm just reading a book to the kids.
Okay.
So if you hear weird voices, it's just me doing wolf growls and princess voices. It's fine.
So you're not having a fit or anything like
No.
that?
The characters might be, but not me. All right, where were we? Hide, she whispered, and the brothers dove underneath the bed. The black door swung open. The twins expected to see a clunky pair of guard boots, but instead, they saw a pair of pink heels. Is that? Alex whispered. Guys, who do you think that is wearing the pink heels? Is that what? Ouch! Connor hit his head hard on the bottom of the bed. You can come out from there, Sleeping Beauty said. The twins couldn't tell if it was a trap. I've called off the guards, Sleeping Beauty added. No one's gonna hurt you. The twins slowly crawled out from under the bed. We didn't steal the slipper, Alex said. It's hard to explain, but I promise we're not thieves. Sleeping Beauty nodded. I believe you. You do? Connor asked. He was stunned. Because if I were you, I would totally think that we're thieves. Sleeping Beauty smiled at them and took a seat on the bed. So, you two are after the wishing spell. The twins nodded self-consciously. It's a really long story, Connor said. I'm sure, Sleeping Beauty said. And you've come to ask me permission to borrow the spindle from my spinning wheel, haven't you? The twins guiltily nodded. Sleeping Beauty laughed to herself. You know, not too long ago, a man came to my castle and asked me to borrow it, she said. At first, I was completely against the idea, but he convinced me. How do you manage that? Alex asked. He told me about the wishing spell and how he had traveled to another world and had fallen in love and was desperate to return. And being somewhat of a romantic myself, I let him humor me with the story, she said, and her smile faded back to the contemplative expression they had first seen. And then he started describing the world to me, a place of machines and technology, a place of enormous structures and land and people unlike any I had ever seen. And I believed him. Why? Alex asked. Because I had dreamed about this place, Sleeping Beauty said. It's complicated, and even I don't understand it, but while I was under that horrible spell, I dreamt about the place he was describing. I dreamed so many things, I had just assumed it had come from my imagination. I never mentioned a word of it to anyone, so I knew he had to be telling the truth. Did he ever return it? Alex asked, desperate to know. Did the spell work for him? Sleeping Beauty studied the twins' face. You're from there, aren't you? She asked. And you're trying to find your way home. Alex and Connor didn't have to respond. She already knew it was true. She reached under one of her pillows on the bed and withdrew the metal spindle. The twins felt their spirits soar. There it was. The man had returned it. The spell must have worked for him. All I'm going to ask in return is that you also return it when you're done, Sleeping Beauty said, and handed it to Alex. As I'm sure you can imagine, it has sentimental value for me. The twins were beaming. Now, they knew getting home was a possibility, that they weren't trapped in Lena stories forever. We're just a couple of strangers, Alex said. Why are you being so kind to us? There are many things that are out of my control, Sleeping Beauty said. Her smile faded again. So I like to help as much as I can, when I can. She stood and walked outside onto the balcony, and the twins followed her. Although the kingdom wasn't in the best condition, the view was spectacular. Alex and Connor could see the entire kingdom and parts of others. The ocean sparkled in the distance, and a beautiful waterfall could be seen up the mountains nearby. It was so beautiful that they had forgotten how high up they were. This used to be the most beautiful of all the kingdoms, Sleeping Beauty said. The rolling green hills, the wildflowers, the river that used to flow. They're all just memories now. Even the natural beauty of the land was put to rest under the awful curse. Will things ever get better? Alex asked. I certainly hope so, Sleeping Beauty said. Can I tell you a secret? She asked the twins, receiving eager nods. I haven't slept since Chase awoke me with the kiss. The twins were shocked. Yikes, Connor said. You must be exhausted. After sleeping for a century, you guys know how long a century is? Yeah, it's 100 years. Good, like cent. There's 100 cents in a dollar. Cent is a prefix that means 100. After sleeping for a century, I'll be quite rested for a while, Sleeping Beauty said. I promised myself, and I promised the kingdom, that I wouldn't rest until it was restored to its original state. Had my parents just let me die as the curse originally intended, none of this would have happened. So I'm prepared to spend the rest of my life, the life that they ensured, making things right again. Alex and Connor felt sorry for the young queen. They'd always been so distracted by the thoughts of the curse, sleeping kingdom, the thought of a cursed sleeping kingdom that they had never thought about the responsibility of a monarch would face, putting it back on its feet. I suppose that's why the wishing spell has always intrigued me, Sleeping Beauty said. It's proof that if someone wants something enough, they're willing to work for it, they can achieve great things. I keep this spindle as a reminder that even the worst curses cast by the most powerful enchantresses can eventually be overcome. The kingdom is very lucky to have a queen like you, Alex said. A weaker person would have given up. Try the ribbon trick, Connor told her. I promise you won't regret it. I will, Sleeping Beauty smiled. It's probably time you headed out. I may believe you, but convincing my husband and the royal advisor of your innocence won't be easy. Follow me. I know a secret way out of the castle. The twins left the castle feeling inspired by Sleeping Beauty. The fairy tale had always romanticized the bravery of the young prince and the horror of the curse that had been cast upon the land, but it had failed to mention what a strong and brave woman the Sleeping Beauty truly was. That's the end of the chapter. Next time we're going to read chapter 15, The Northern Kingdom. All right, bye guys. See you soon.